I think we are all wondering, how did you get started in equine genetics? That's a very unique career, and I think it's really cool.
Thank you. Well, it's a long, long story. So, I was still in vet school, and fortunately, one of my vet school professors, she taught animal breeding and genetics, and she had this assignment where each one of us had to present something at the end of the semester. So randomly, she assigned me because she knew I liked horses. So I've been a horse girl my whole life. So she knew I liked horses. So she assigned me to talk about coat color genetics. And I went completely nuts with it, you know. My presentation was so good because I did all the research. I looked at the scientific papers. That she still actually uses my slides up to this day. So it was kind of cool. I really enjoyed it. So I started doing a lot more research on genetics on my spare time by myself. It was kind of a hobby. And I ended up meeting Dr. Ansteiger, which at the time was a Ph.D. student at Cornell, and she was friends with Dr. Moore. And she was doing some research on gait genetics in horses. So the way that they move, why some horses are 4-beat gaited and some horses are not. And I ended up offering to help her because I thought her research was absolutely amazing. And for that reason, we became really good friends. And she told me to apply for some programs that Cornell had at the time for vet students. I was accepted into one of them. Ended up spending a summer at Cornell doing research at the equine genetics lab there, and came back to Brazil. So I'm originally from Brazil, and came back to Brazil, or went back to Brazil, finished my DVM in Brazil. And after that, the professor who was the professor at Cornell, she had moved to the University of Florida, and she offered me a position to do a PhD with her in horse genetics. And of course I took it. So here I am now. I graduated from my PhD in 2020, did a postdoc in population genetics and honeybees after that, totally unrelated to horses, but DNA is DNA. And now I work for Edelon, which is a genetic testing company.
Is what was important to you when choosing a college? So why did you choose the college you chose?
Well, my vet school, in this case, my vet school I chose because it was in my home state, first of all. And second of all, it was one of the top 10 in Brazil. It was really, really hard to get in. I remember at the time when I got in, it was like 16 people per spot. So it was insane. And the PhD was because of the advisor. So it's not as much as the school as it is the person you're going to work with and do your research with and you're going to learn from. So yeah, I couldn't have picked a better advisor for my PhD.
What's your favorite part about your career?
You know, everybody kind of wonders why I didn't follow a career in vet medicine, right? Because you went to vet school, it's so hard. But, you know, the clinics is not as exciting to me as research. So, of course, on the clinics, you get to work with the animals, and that's super nice. And when you think of yourself when you're young and you want to go to vet school, that's what you think. Like, I want to go to vet school. I want to work with animals. I want to do clinics. I want to help animals, right? But to be honest, clinics is a lot of the same thing. And I'm not very good with routine. I'm one of these people that really, really enjoy puzzles. So if you bring me something new every day to try to figure it out, that's going to be my dream career. So right now, I work for a genetic testing company, but what I do is a lot of research. So every time we have new data coming in from all the tests we do, I get the chance to run new studies, to do new things. So it's really exciting.
What are the biggest positives and negatives in your career?
Well, I would say the biggest positive is keep working on the field that I absolutely love, which is genetics in horses, right? So I still have contact with horses. I can still talk to horse owners. I go to farms. I collect samples. It's still a little bit of the clinical side, but without actually being on the clinics. The negative that I would say, not as much as working for a company because we don't have that problem, but if you were in academia, for example, you have to really worry about grants. So where are you getting that money to do your research? And it's getting harder and harder to get grants, to get funded for research. And that's sort of a thing all over the world. It's just not in the United States.
So about like the genetics, what do you look for in a horse that you want, that you would consider being a good horse with good genetics, like conformation, temperament, and behavior, things like that?
That's a great question. Well, you know, a lot of the traits that we know are personal preference. So coat color, for example, it's completely personal preference, right? You do have some coat color genes that are also involved with diseases. So for those, I personally would be against, but some people like the color so much that they don't mind that the horse might have a certain condition afterwards, or it might have a condition because of the color, right? So it depends. But for myself, for my own personal horses, I have to say I am a bay lover. I love my bays and I love my mares. So yeah, it's odd. I like mares. What else? So there is a genetic test that analyzes now some of the behavioral traits. So we're looking at vigilance versus curiosity. So that was discovered in thoroughbreds. And as you can imagine by the name of it, the horses that have the curiosity version of that gene, they are more prone to be that kind of curious horse that you're going to walk into the paddock, like you're going to walk into the pasture and they're going to be all over you. They're going to stick their heads into your pocket or pull your hat off or just be like almost obnoxious, right? While the vigilant horses are going to be the ones that are going to be on one side of the pasture looking at you sideways, being like, okay, I'm not sure if I should go talk to you or not. So for me, I like one of each. These have been shown to be really good for sport horses, for example, and personally, I'm a jumper. But if you were a barrel racer, let's say, you might favor horses that have both vigilance alleles because they will be more reactive. They'll tend to think of more by themselves. Or if you're working as like teaching tricks to your horse, you might like the curiosity a little bit more because that horse is going to be more in your pocket and it's going to be trying to please you a little bit more. So yeah, it all depends, I think. You know, it's a personal preference. There's not a perfect, what is a champion? What is the perfect horse? That doesn't exist because we all have preferences. And that's the beauty of it, right? If everybody liked blue, what would be the other colors?
Yeah, and what were some of those colors that cause diseases?
Of those coat colors that causes diseases, well, we have gray, for example. So horses that turn white with time, right? So gray horses, they're more predisposed to developing melanoma. Luckily, melanoma is not as aggressive in horses as it is in humans. But at the same time, if the horse is gray, by the age of 15, about 70% of them will have melanomas, visible or not. So they might be hidden within the body of the horse and you can't see them outside. And by the age of 22, all of them, 100% of these horses will have melanomas, okay? So it might not cause a severe condition that might cause the horse to die, but it might. So it's always kind of like, you know, coin toss sort of thing. The other one is Appaloosa. So the Appaloosa spotting pattern, which is, I know it's a name of a breed. We call it genetically the leopard gene. So the leopard spotting pattern, when the horses, Appaloosa horses, have few spots, they're usually homozygous Appaloosas, and homozygote Appaloosas have a condition called congenital night blindness. So they can't see very well on dusk, dawn, low light situations. So it's not going to be an issue completely for the horse, but you have to remind yourself that, okay, this horse cannot see as well as the other ones. I need to be a little bit more careful around him, around dawn and dusk, you know, make sure that he knows that I'm there, that kind of thing. The other one is Frame Overo. So Frame Overo is a white spotting pattern. It's really cool because it makes like jagged sort of white on the body. And it's called Frame Overo because it actually looks like the color is framing the white spot. So that's why it's called Frame Overo. Problem with Frame Overo is homozygote horses. So horses that have two copies of Frame Overo, they're born completely white. And they suffer from a condition that causes a lack of innervation in their guts, in their intestines. So because of that, the intestines can't move. So as you know, intestines need to move so things can pass through and go out, right? So if they can't put stuff out, it's impacted. And if it's impacted in there, it will cause colic and the horse will die from it. The foal will die from it. The main issue with Frame Overo is that not every single horse that has a Frame Overo allele will have a white spotting pattern necessarily. So you have what we call crypto Frame Overos, right? Which they have absolutely nothing on their bodies that even resemble Frame Overo, and still they carry the allele. So that's why genetic testing is sort of like a huge deal. So you can figure out those sort of issues with your horse prior to actually breeding them.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you work for a genetic company. What was the company's name and what do you guys like do?
So I was lucky enough that I actually started as a consultant for Edelon Diagnostics in 2016. So I was still in my PhD, and my PI was one of the founding geneticists in the company, and she introduced me to the CEO, and we got along really well. So I started working for them as consultant. Just from time to time, they would ask for my help with things. And after I finished my postdoc, they actually offered me a full-time position. So it's a genetic testing company. The whole idea behind Etalon is that we offer genetic testing panels. We do not usually offer, you can purchase a single test, right? Any company will offer you that. But the idea here was, okay, we're horse people, all of us. Everybody that works in the company is a horse person. Even the CEO, the owner of the company, is a horse person, which is really great because we understand what other horse people need. So the whole idea behind it was, when I genetic test my horse, I don't want to have to select the traits. I don't understand the tests, so I just want somebody to give me like a full panel and explain things to me. So that's what we do. You buy the full panel. So we test for every single thing that is published on scientific literature, basically, that is proven in horses. And if you have questions, you will have somebody from the company that you can call and ask questions, and the person is going to sit down with you and go through the whole test and explain every single point of it. So that's as a horse person, I appreciate that very much. Plus, we're always doing research, which that's the reason why I joined the company, right? So let's say that you submit a sample and your horse has this different white spotting pattern that comes back negative for all the known patterns that we have on the panel. We're going to reach out to you and say, you know, your horse doesn't look like it has anything that we know. Do you mind that we do some research on it? And we can actually find out if there is anything on their genetics that is causing that white spotting pattern. We have a publication that was just accepted coming out on 2 new spotting patterns that we found on 2 different families of horses, like brand new. So it's always exciting to do that.
What does an average day look like for you?
Well, that's the other reason why I like working for industry, is because it's super fast-paced. So my days, the company is actually in California and I live in Florida, because one of the other things that I do for the company is kind of like I'm a bridge between the Brazil expansion efforts that we have right now. So we're expanding the genetic testing offers to Brazil, and kind of doing the work here in the US as well. So I have to be closer to Brazil time to be able to work with them. But at the same time, I have to kind of I kind of have to work around the clock to work with my fellow colleagues that are in California, where the company is. So my day actually starts around 10, 11 a.m. It goes to 7, 8 p.m. Florida time most days. But it's really gratifying, and it's really fast-paced. Like, I'm doing things all day long, every day, just writing manuscripts, analyzing data, calling clients, setting up new tests, talking to other folks in the company, fixing up bioinformatics or genetic questions that they might have. But yeah, it's really exciting.
Butcher this word, but we saw on your bio that you study anhidrosis.
Anhidrosis, yes.
Okay, cool. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just released today that we are expanding a study on anhidrosis with Edelon to validate what I found on my PhD. So anhidrosis is just a fancy word that means that the horse can't sweat. So anybody that's been around horses a lot, especially in the South, has seen horses that are not able to sweat properly sometimes, or sometimes even completely. The problem here is when a horse cannot sweat well, it cannot regulate their body temperatures. So just like humans, so there's only 3 animals that use sweat to thermoregulate, regulate their body temperatures. So that's us, right? We sweat. So when we're working out and we are overheating, we start sweating so our bodies can keep control of the temperature. Horses, same thing. So when it's hot outside or they're working, you can see that sweat coming down. Like if you lift up the saddle, it's going to be soaking underneath the saddle pad, right? And one species of monkeys called pata monkeys. So that's how close horses are to us in that kind of sense. So what we were looking at when I did my research was if there's any genetic causes that might make horses stop sweating, because it's really dangerous to them. You can imagine that if one cannot thermoregulate properly, that means that they're going to overheat. As humans, we can always go inside the house and sit down on an AC room and just chill, you know, or have a glass of water with ice. I don't know. But horses are not the same thing. So if a horse overheats, they can go into shock. And if they go into shock, they can actually die. So they go into a heat shock and they can die from it. So most of these horses suffered a lot. There's not a lot known about this disease, even though it's really widespread. It varies between like 6 to 11% of the equine population. For example, in thoroughbreds, there was a study showing that about 25% of the thoroughbreds in racing are affected by anhidrosis. They can't sweat really well. So there's a lot of horses suffering from it, and we still don't know a lot about it. All the treatments that are available in the market, let's say when you go to a tack store, there's a lot of supplements on the shelves. Unfortunately, none of those are scientifically proven. So there's no scientific data to back them up. So we don't know a lot about the disease itself. So I looked into the genetics. I did find a candidate variation within a gene that seems to be correlated to anhidrosis. And the next step that we're going to do with the company is we're actually asking for more samples of horses that have chronic type of anhidrosis, that have had lasted for more than a year, so we can test them for that mutation on their gene and see if it actually stands, if we can validate it. And if we can, that will provide us with at least a genetic test that will be able to screen for horses that might suffer from that in the future, right? As well as we'll give veterinarians some guidance on what to do next. So if we know this is the gene that is causing it and what this gene does, so we can think about treatments for it as well.
The next question is, what is the most challenging aspect of your current research?
Oh, well, you know, phenotypes. So do you understand what phenotype is? No? Okay. So this is a fancy word too for trait, for characteristics. So when you're running genomic analysis, you need really good phenotypes because you need to match that information that you see on the DNA to whatever you're seeing on the horse. So let's say that you're looking at white spotting patterns, right? So you ask for the owners to submit samples of horses with bald faces, which means the head is completely white. But some of the owners think that a bald face is just white to the lip and not the whole head. So there you have a problem already on your phenotype, right? So phenotyping to me is the most complex, like the most complicated thing right now on the research side. The technology, the genetic analysis, everything is super advanced at this point. We know a lot. There's still a lot that we need to understand, of course, because we're always learning. But the good quality phenotyping, good quality knowing what that trait should look like and doing it in a way that every single sample has a similar thing, it's hard. It's really hard.
That sounds very hard. What are the skills and that are important to your position?
I know that's a really good question. So you have to be very curious. You have to want to know things and look up things by yourself and want to research as much as you can and read a lot. But I have to say the reads are very exciting reads because they're manuscripts, they're journal publications, they're scientific articles. So you're reading things that are short, basically. You're not reading full books, but they have brand new information every time. And it's always exciting to read these kind of stuff. What else? You kind of need to think forward as well. So you're collecting, you're doing something at point A, but your mind is already at point B, right? So you're forward thinking, troubleshooting, knowing how to troubleshoot something, know how to look up how to fix things by yourself. So most of the answers to my questions are on Google, for example. So knowing how to like do a really good Google search is really important.
The last question is, what activities can students participate in now that will help them in the future if they want to go into like a career like yours?
Well, you know, getting involved in science. So some of the research labs have opportunities for high school students to intern. So for example, summertime, if you're not in summer school, take some time and go intern for a lab, you know, it's gonna be fun. You can spend 2-3 hours a week in the lab, learn some skills, learn how to do science. What else? Be curious, read. So there's a huge platform now that we can do research on, and it's called Google Scholar. So all you have to do is look up keywords. So if you look horse and gene, it's going to pop up thousands and thousands of articles. And all you have to do is basically just download these articles and read them up. And for the words that you might not understand what they mean, you can always look up on Google too what they mean. So yeah, but definitely reach out to scientists, ask if you can participate on something, ask if you can help with the research. Look up the research that they're doing. See if something that interests you, right? So when I was still in vet school, that's basically what I did. That's how I found the Dr. Steiger, and I reached out to her. I'm like, can I help you? I would love to be a part of this. I really don't want anything out of it. I just want to be a part of it. So yeah, being proactive, I would say.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you guys liked it. So yes.